हेलो एंड वेलकम टू श्रीराम IAS। आप सबका स्वागत है हमारे इस इंडियन इकोनॉमी के डिस्कशन में। इन दिस डिस्कशन व्हाट वी यूजुअली डू इज वी डिस्कस द बुक बाय Sriram sir himself. This book, the target is very simple, that we will cover it from the cover to cover, and we will also make sure that we understand this book line by line. We also have a target to minimum, at least minimum, first of all complete this book. Then when you complete this book, there are PYQs or Prelims and Mains written after every chapter. So once we are done with the book, we will also discuss the PYQs. After that, there will be some specific videos on the PYQs of which are mentioned on this book from 2015 to 2026. All the PYQs of prelims will be discussed. Further, after that, all the PYQs of mains will be discussed in these videos. Done? Sure. Now, to all of those who have been following us or who have watched these videos last year or have watched, I would say, listened to the discussions last year, they might be knowing that last year also we discussed these things. Last year also we completed the concepts to some extent. This year we will be completing the whole book and we will be covering every topic of Indian economy. Now this book itself is written in such a manner by the author that you actually understand the economics. You actually understand what lies behind the economics, what are the concepts, and to the most, I would say, value addition part of it, what I am doing at the personal level, I am adding some stories to it. Stories from the history of economics, okay, which makes the lectures interesting. Today, we will be starting with 8th 5-year plan. We have already completed 1st to 7th 5-year plan. Today's topic will be starting from 8th 5-year plan. Now, till now, we already have discussed about the story of India's growth and India's planning. We began with 1st 5-year plan. In the 1st 5-year plan, our target was agricultural growth. In the 2nd 5-year plan, our target shifted towards industrial growth. But from the 3rd 5-year plan onwards, 3rd, 4th and 5th, we witnessed destability and we witnessed plan failures because of some external shocks and because of some internal shocks also. A simple analogy to this would be, say for example, if economists just a moment. Say if economists were to discuss about that what are the upcoming strategies, what is the upcoming projections of economy in 2000, when there was no invention of, say, fast-track social media communication, or I would say in 2000 or before that in 1990s, when there was no such fast-track communication through mobile phones. Now, do you understand that these innovations or inventions, or I would rather say, if we currently talk about satellite-based communication, or if we talk about quantum computing, why am I telling these stories? This makes sense to the students of economics, to those students who are curious to understand the subject. Now understand that these inventions, they happen at certain particular point of time and they have not been calculated by economists further. ठीक है, समझो इस चीज़ को। हमने जब इकोनॉमिक कैलकुलेशंस करते हैं, जब प्रोजेक्शंस करते हैं, जब टारगेट सेट करते हैं, जब ग्रोथ के टारगेट सेट करते हैं फ्यूचर के लिए, we are not calculating something which is going to happen in future. Say there is a tsunami, an earthquake. Do you understand? A landslide, a drought, which is unpredictable, which we cannot predict, a cyclone, which we cannot predict, or an innovation which may lead or which may help the economy to grow by bounds and leaps, or which may deteriorate or which may lead to degrowth in the economy by many folds. Simple. So whenever we economists set targets, whenever we try to understand that how this subject or how the economy is going to perform in next 5 years, we usually do not calculate these things because these are not in the minds of the people at that point of time. So that is why economy sometimes becomes unstable, like we witnessed in third 5-year plan, fourth 5-year plan, fifth 5-year plan, because due to external shocks and internal shocks, say Chinese war, say Pakistan's war, say 1971 war, say 1975 emergency, all of this led to destabilization in economy. Simple. Post this, there is one more event which we have to discuss, and that is the event of 1991, when India witnessed a balance of payment crisis. Now, what is balance of payment crisis? It is one simple thing, that we had very less forex. Our imports were much more than our exports, and we didn't had enough resources to cover or to pay for our imports. Very simple, very simple. Otherwise, when you see the balance of payment statement, the flow statement of balance of payment, what is balance of payment? It is the record of all the transactions between a country and rest of the world. That how much goods do we trade, how much loan or money or finances, say capital, labor or anything, how much does flow out of the country and how much flows into the country. That is recorded in a statement, and that statement is known as balance of payment statement. Very simple. Now, once we face this crisis, that in the balance of payment, we have two accounts. One is the current account, another is the capital account. When there is, I would say, disbalance between the two, we usually equate it by accommodating transactions. We usually do some, say, provisioning of these two accounts. We usually keep on reserves so that we do provisioning of these accounts. We have surplus in current account and deficit in surplus in capital account and deficit in current account, and we balance the two accounts. Because I will tell you one simple thing. Say you are a businessman, you are a businessman, and now you are investing into your business. Now the point is that to a particular person, you are lending your goods, you are giving them goods on credit. And to someone, you are purchasing raw material on credit. Now, this cannot happen that you purchase all your raw material on payment. ठीक है, आप सारा पैसा उसको दे दो raw material खरीदने में, आप कैश में सारा raw material खरीद लो, and you sell your goods on credit, और उधार पे बेचते जाओ. Now, what will happen? You will all your resources, all your capital, whether it is working capital or fixed capital, it will start depleting. और जो ही capital deplete होता जाएगा, now there will be a condition when you won't be able to pay for your raw material anymore, and your supply of raw material will stop. Then you will ask for the people to whom you give your goods on credit that please pay me back, and they will say that we do not have enough resources to pay you. And that is the situation what happens usually with the businesses. So 8th 5-year plan. Why did I discuss all of this? Just to make sure that you understand that why a crisis happens in a country, an economy or a business. 8th 5-year plan started from 1992 to 1997, the structural reforms era. Why is it known as an era of structural reforms? क्यों इसको era बोला जाता है of structural reforms? Very simple it is, because at this point of time, Indian economy is transitioning from the socialistic pattern of society to now ready for reforms of the modern age. Liberalization of the economy, where we will liberalize. What do we mean by liberalizing? Liberalizing means that you let people do whatever they want to do unless they create harm to others. That is the basic fundamental of liberalism. And you let them do whatever they want to do. Privatization. What is privatization? That you reduce the control of government. Like our Prime Minister Narendra Modi said multiple times that government has no business to do business. What does that mean? That it is not the duty of the government to involve into production and supply of goods and services. Rather, government should be a facilitator. So what is privatization? When you let the private players to produce more and more. You do not say that this is the monopoly of the government. Only we will produce this. No one will enter railways, no one will enter atomic energy, no one will enter coal, no one will enter or no one will have business in petroleum or any other thing. Then what is globalization? When you connect your economy with the rest of the world and allow free flow of capital and labor. Do you understand? Capital, labor and goods and services. When you allow free flow of these with the rest of the world, allow foreign companies, foreign people to invest in your country and allow your people to invest in outside of the world. When you open your economy, that is globalization. When you connect to the world through trade, through investment and through movement of labor. Simple. Now, that is something which we did in 1991. But the world currently is facing something else. That is, reverse globalization was something different. Let it be. But yes, that is protectionism. What world is currently facing is protectionism in terms of trade. Reverse globalization is that is something different concept. We will talk about it later. What is protectionism? I told you that liberalization, privatization is something which we are doing with our own economy, domestic economy. Globalization is dealing with the rest of the world. Now what is happening? Majority of the countries, particularly the developed countries, say actually the protectionism started with the US, started with China, they started to protect their own economy. In order to protect their own domestic economy, they started to impose restrictions on the rest of the world that you cannot trade with us. If you want to sell your goods in our economy, we will impose some tariffs on you. If you want your people to work in my economy, my country, I will impose a fees on them. I will have restrictions on all of your goods, whether those are monetary restrictions or those are standard-wise restrictions or phytosanitary measures. That is how protectionism works. That is why UPSC asked a question in 2025 itself, in mains 2025, that how does this protectionism impact the Indian economy and how does the protectionism actually lead to something which we should be aware of and which we should prepare about through Atmanirbharta or through self-reliance. That is something. But remember, unless and until you understand the context of LPGs, you won't be able to understand the context of protectionism. Okay? These two concepts cannot be discussed in silos. Understood? Chalo. Now, starting with 8th 5-year plan, the era of reforms, India overtook a loan by IMF. First loan 1966, next 1981, and now the third one is in 1992. Because we had balance of payment crisis, so we needed 4x, we took a loan from IMF. When the 4x reserves depleted to less than $1 billion, twin deficit of the budget and current account required structural reforms. Current account required structural reforms. 5.6% was the target growth and actual growth which we achieved was 6.8%. It is much more than what we targeted. Understood? So, main objectives of 8th 5-year plan were controlling the population growth, poverty reduction and employment generation, strengthening the infrastructure and institution building. At the end, we also had Panchayati Raj institutions, Nagarpalikas in rural development, because this is the era where we will enact the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. ठीक है? समझ में आ गई बात? Now, there were two such events. There were two such events जहाँ पे we changed. There were two such events in the history of mankind where we changed. Say for example, where we had in the history of India's planning or planned economic development, there were two such eras, two such times. First was here and earlier in 1966, when we had multiple reforms. Last time also I mentioned about nationalization, privy purses abolition, and multiple other things which we had at that point of time. Remember that date and remember this date where we will have multiple such reforms in the Indian economy. Understood? Done. So 8 5-year plan, it was postponed by 2 years because of the political uncertainty at center. Do you remember Janata Party and then back again? हाँ, जो हमने यहाँ पे देखा था 7th 5-year plan में. This Janata Party and then back again, ठीक है, 1980 के बाद. So therefore, now it worsened the balance of payment position, rising debt burden, widening the budget deficit, recession in the industry and inflation were the key issues during the launch of the plan. Next, the plan undertook drastic policy measures to combat the bad economic situation and undertook an annual average growth of how much? 5.6%. However, what we achieved is much more than that because of introduction of fiscal and economic reforms which included liberalization under the Prime Ministership of Narasimha Rao, PV Narasimha Rao. And that is why these reforms are also known as Rao-Manmohan reforms. Understood? Some of the main economic outcomes during 8 5-year plan period were rapid economic growth because we had a annual growth rate so fast as 6.8%. High growth of agriculture and allied sectors, also manufacturing sector grew. Growth in exports and imports, improvement in trade and current account deficit. High growth rate was achieved even though the share of public sector in the total investment had declined. ठीक है? क्यों होगा share of public sector in the private investment in the overall sector? Why will the share of public sector decrease? Because we are going for privatization. Understood? So private sector ka share in the investment will increase. What were Rao-Manmohan model or what was Rao-Manmohan model of privatization, globalization and liberalization reforms? They first said that we need to reorient states role. जो हमारी country है, जो हमारा government है, जो हमारा state है, state means the government itself. There should be less role and the focus of the state should be on social and infrastructural development rather than doing the business themselves. Government should not establish its monopolies. Rather, government should focus on providing to the people welfare, and social reforms, education, health, and food, grains. All of this should be provided by the government itself. Dismantle the controls. Government should dismantle the controls means we should not establish license Raj. We should dismantle the license Raj. एक प्राइवेट प्लेयर अगर उसको बस एक दुकान खोलनी है, अगर उसको दुकान पे काम करना, अपनी दुकान स्टार्ट करनी है, उसको 10 लाइसेंस लेनी पड़ती थी. तो वो लाइसेंसेस को खत्म करना, लाइसेंस राज को खत्म करना है. ठीक है, जिसकी वजह से ब्यूरोक्रेटिक रेड टेपिज्म था, उसको खत्म करना था. हाँ, क्रिएट द कंपटीशन इन मार्केट. अभी रिसेंटली देयर वाज एन इशू इन इंडिया दैट वाज प्राइवेटाइजेशन ऑफ एयरपोर्ट्स. ये अभी कुछ दिन पहले की बात है, इसी महीने जून की ही बात है, जून के ही महीने की न्यूज़ है. प्राइवेटाइजेशन ऑफ एयरपोर्ट्स. प्राइवेटाइजेशन ऑफ एयरपोर्ट्स में अगर आप देखो 2019 के बाद से देयर इज वन बिग प्लेयर दैट इज अडानी ग्रुप हु करंटली होल्ड्स अराउंड 8 to 9 एयरपोर्ट्स. ठीक है. Now, whenever you go for tender or whenever you release tenders for the privatization of airports, because there are 11 more airports in the third round of privatization which have been announced recently. Understand that government is trying to not let one big player have all the airports. That is why government brought in new reforms in the airport privatization. That there can be only 5 to 6 airports with one player or 2 to 3 bundles of airports with one player. Not more than that. We should have multiple players so that competition gets established. There is a duopoly in telecom sector. If you see, there are only 2 players, Jio and Airtel. But government has back again and again tried to revive Vodafone so that the competition lives. Because once there is competition in the economy, people will have better goods and services at better prices. Global integration, we already discussed it, globalization. ठीक है. What was the result of 4x LPG reforms? First was 4x accumulation. So we were back again, accumulated 4x, rejuvenated our 4x. हमने फॉरेक्स रिजर्व्स को इतना इंक्रीज किया तब से लेके आज तक कि दोबारा ऐसी बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट की क्राइसिस नहीं आई. दैट वाज ओनली वंस दैट वी हैड बीओपी क्राइसिस. ठीक है. आर फाइनेंशियल आर दिस ओरिजिनल डॉक्यूमेंट ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट मेंशंस दैट बीओपी क्राइसिस और आई वुड से फॉरेक्स क्राइसिस, नॉट बीओपी क्राइसिस बट फॉरेक्स क्राइसिस हैपेंड 2 or 3 times, 2 times बिफोर 1991. ठीक है. ऐसा नहीं है दैट इंडिया फेस्ड ओनली वंस. समझ में आ गई बात? हाँ, फॉरेक्स क्राइसिस 2-3 बार हुई है बट 1991 से पहले, उसके बाद नहीं हुई, मेजर क्राइसिस नहीं हुई. फॉरेन फ्लो इंक्रीज्ड क्योंकि हमने लिबरलाइज कर दिया इकोनॉमी को, ग्लोबलाइज कर दिया, तो अब फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट एंड फॉरेन इंस्टीट्यूशनल इन्वेस्टमेंट बोथ विल कम टू इंडिया. ठीक है. Due to this, India will become a competitive economy because now there are private players also who are participating more and more, and there are global players also who are coming to India, and they will also increase the competition. Done. Exports will grow. क्यों exports grow होंगे? Because we are liberalizing our trade, we are allowing people to trade more with Indian economy. That is why. Now understand there is a concept over here that is known, called as indicative planning. Now what is indicative planning and why did we introduce indicative planning, or who actually introduced indicative planning? It was adopted from 8th 5-year plan onwards with the economic reforms launched in 1991. Simple. Now, remember that indicative planning means what? Indicative planning means now the state will set the broad targets and all the other players, whether private or public, will be nudged. The behavior will be changed so that we all pursue to achieve that target. Therefore, state will come down from its hard stance to a soft stance, or we say soft launch करेंगे plans को. कैसे? There will be a shift from imperative and directive. That is, हमने target set किया कि हमें से 20 लाख old age women को पेंशन के लिए एनरोल करना है, या इनका हमें बैंक अकाउंट खोलना है फॉर देयर पेंशन डीबीटी के लिए, है ना. नाउ देयर विल बी इंडिकेटिव सॉफ्ट लॉन्च दैट वी विल डू फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन. ठीक है. क्योंकि नाउ सी अंडरस्टैंड, नाउ द प्लानिंग एज प्राइवेट सेक्टर हैज बीन गिवन सब्सटैंशियल रोल, सो वी विल लीव इट टू प्राइवेट सेक्टर. दैट ओके, यू स्टार्ट योर वेंचर, you start your say horticulture business, you start your cold chain, we will give you subsidy, है ना. Now you start your business and do your business. We are there to support you. We are there to facilitate you with electricity, with roads, with connectivity, with supply chain. Do you understand? State will be just a facilitator after this. Policy climate, the government creates predictable, irreversible, transparent policies. Do you understand that how much fiscal, monetary and investment policies will change? That will be, हाँ, government सारी policies को transparent रखेगा. यहाँ पे red tapeism नहीं होगा, ठीक है. यहाँ पे everything will be in open so that private sector can have confidence in the market. That if I invest my money into the market, tomorrow government is not going to charge me double the taxation money. अगर मैंने आज बिजनेस स्टार्ट कर लिया, अब मैं कल को प्रॉफिट कमाने लग गया, तो गवर्नमेंट मेरा टैक्स का जो रेट है वो डबल नहीं कर देगा, बिकॉज फिस्कल पॉलिसी इज ऑलरेडी डिफाइंड फॉर से 5 years, 10 years और 20 years. Understood? Strategic vision. Planning Commission works on long-term strategic vision, anticipating the trends and evolving competitive strategies. Understood? Next is the 9th 5-year plan. 9th 5-year plan, 1997 to 2002. This plan commenced amid political instability and the East Asian financial crisis of 1997. ठीक है, इस टाइम पे होती है फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस, ठीक है. बट इसके साथ साथ देयर आर मल्टीपल अदर थिंग्स विच आर पॉजिटिव ओवर हेयर, बिकॉज इंडिया फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम issued its first American depository receipt, ADR, and Infosys was the first such, I would say, MNC, or not MNC per se, Infosys was first such corporate of India which was listed on NASDAQ, ठीक है, index. इसके साथ साथ द कारगिल वॉर ऑकर्ड, जो कि हमारे लिए बहुत बड़ी दुविधा थी, ठीक है। यहां पे इंडिया का डिफेंस एंड इंडिया के इंटरनेशनल और आई वुड से बायलेटरल रिलेशंस with USA and Russia got defined. Now this was the era where India thought that we need to invest into defense. ठीक है, समझ में आ गई बात। यहाँ से बहुत सारी चीज़ें उभर के ऐसे आएंगी और बहुत सारे रिफॉर्म्स आएंगे जहाँ अब इन्वेस्टमेंट इंडिया का मेन, गवर्नमेंट का, स्टेट का मेन फोकस विल बी मोर ऑन डिफेंस, ठीक है। इन 1999 Gram Swarozgar Yojana was launched and it absorbed all the earlier schemes. Why? Because this is basically for the holistic rural development. And currently अगर आप देखो तो National Rural Health Mission, this National Rural Livelihood Mission NRLM is under, हाँ जो अभी चल रहा है that is NRLM. इसके बाद 2000 में प्रधानमंत्री ग्राम सड़क योजना, सो दैट वी कनेक्ट द रूरल रोड्स, वी कनेक्ट इंडिया टू फार आई वुड से रूरल एरिया, सारे रूरल एरियाज को कनेक्ट करें। गोल्डन क्वाड्रिलेटरल हाईवे वाज आल्सो लॉन्च्ड एंड रिमेंबर यूपीएससी ऑलरेडी आस्क्ड अ क्वेश्चन ऑन गोल्डन क्वाड्रिलेटरल। वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स बट इन द आई वुड से चैप्टर्स ahead when we discuss roads, when we discuss railways, when we discuss airports, we will be discussing all of this, ठीक है, whatever is important. बट यहाँ पे सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ एक हुई विच सेट द वर्ल्ड, आई वुड से विच शॉक्ड द वर्ल्ड एक्चुअली, दैट वाज द अटैक ऑफ 9/11 ऑन ट्विन टावर्स, ठीक है। दैट वाज द टेरर अटैक, 9/11 का टेरर अटैक, जिसकी वजह से द वर्ल्ड एक्चुअली शुक। और 9/11 का जो अटैक था, यहाँ पे वर्ल्ड लेवल पे एक कंसेंसस बैठना स्टार्ट हुआ दैट वी ऑल शुड ज्वाइन हैंड्स टुगेदर अगेंस्ट द टेररिज्म, ठीक है। डन, चलो। हाँ, प्राइवेटाइजेशन ऑफ पब्लिक सेक्टर, दिस पब्लिक सेक्टर अंडरटेकिंग्स स्टार्टेड, डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट बिगैन इन प्रीवियस प्लान, न्यूक्लियर टेस्ट्स वेर कंडक्टेड इन 1998। ये जो इवेंट्स मैं यहाँ पे बोल रहा हूँ, चाहे वो नेस्डेक का है इवेंट, इंडिया का पहला एडीआर है, कारगिल वॉर है, प्रधानमंत्री ग्राम सड़क योजना है, चलो ये स्कीम्स को तो छोड़ सकते हैं, बट गोल्डन क्वाड्रिलेटरल है, पीएसयूज का प्राइवेटाइजेशन एंड न्यूक्लियर टेस्ट्स, ये कुछ इवेंट्स है और बहुत ही ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट इवेंट्स है। दीज इवेंट्स मस्ट बी रिमेंबर्ड इन अ क्रोनोलॉजिकल ऑर्डर बिकॉज लास्ट टाइम ऑल्सो यूपीएससी आस्क्ड अ सेम क्वेश्चन ऑन दीज इवेंट्स, ठीक है। सो दैट वाज 9th 5-year प्लान। नाउ मूविंग टू 10th 5-year प्लान, द टारगेट ऑफ 10th 5-year प्लान was 8% growth, but what we actually achieved was 7.6% growth, ठीक। Why? Because besides the growth targets, besides the targets of 10th 5-year plan, there was also one more thing, that is a set of 11 indicators, or I would say there were monitorable targets. Now state said that if we are not going to do the business, we should at least set targets, we should at least set targets for achieving the developmental goals also. Say for example, development mein we already discussed that there is, say, infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, life expectancy, education में there is mean years of schooling, average years of schooling, and all of these targets should be set and then these targets should be achieved. So we set actually 11 such indicators besides 8% growth rate, that we need to achieve 8% growth rate plus we need to achieve these targets. Say the target was reduction in gender gap in literacy, wage rate, reduction in infant and maternal mortality rate, improvement in literacy, access of potable drinking water, cleaning of major polluted rivers. Governance was considered as a factor of development and agriculture was declared as prime moving force for the economy. Panchayati Raj institutions, social development, state-wise breakup of targets for growth and social development. All of these goals were set. All of these goals were set by the 10th 5-year plan. Understood yahan tak? So therefore, there are 4 things which we should at least mention or at least remember. One target was to cut the poverty gap by 5% by 2007, by the end of the plan. Some more, I would say, targets. Plan was commenced with severe drought. Now, do you remember in the beginning of this lecture, I mentioned about that there are some particular things, some particular external shocks which we usually do not consider, like droughts, tsunamis, wars, which usually are not preconceived or pre-calculated. They happen and then their impact happens. Therefore, we had set a target of 8%, but actual target was achieved at 7.6%. Further, GDP plunged to 4%, then exceeded 8% next year due to base effect. क्यों किया यहाँ पे इतना ज़्यादा? क्योंकि base year change हुआ यहाँ पे. Now, once you change the base year, GDP will also change. Manrega and National Rural Health Mission was rolled out. Economy grew by 7.8%, and this is majorly termed because there was change in the methods of calculation, and same effect will be there in 2015 also. Okay? When we change the base year. Understood? That was 10th 5-year plan. The 11th 5-year plan, its theme was towards faster and more inclusive growth from 2007 to 2012. Three main objectives. First was to accelerate the growth. Second was poverty and jobs, to decrease the poverty and increase the jobs. And the main focus was on agriculture, education, infrastructure. These three things. Because we needed to grow the economy, obviously. That is the prime job of state. Understood? 11th 5-year plan's target was 9% growth. Now understand that how beautifully are we growing. But actually we achieved 8% growth. That too is still a good number. India became one of the fastest economies of the world, fastest growing economies of the world. It aimed towards faster and more inclusive growth. The aim of 12th 5-year plan was asked by UPSC. After UPA rode back to power on the plank of helping आम आदमी, common man, UPA का वापस आया यहाँ पे 2007 से लेके 2012 तक, फिर 2014 में हमारा इंडिया आ जाए. Now, India emerged as one of the fastest growing economy by the end of the 10th plan. The savings and investment rate had increased. Industrial sector had responded well to face competition, and इसके साथ साथ सारी चीज़ों में growth देखने को मिला. So, 11th 5-year plan set the target or set the vision for inclusive growth, that we need to include all the sectors, we need to include all the sections of the population in the growth. Economic foundation was laid. India emerged as one of the fastest growing economies. Further, social change. Growth wasn't sufficiently inclusive for SC, STs, minorities. Now, इनके लिए steps लेने की ज़रूरत थी. That is what was highlighted by 11th 5-year plan. However, the strategic response for these goals was that we will release or we will start the poverty reduction, education access and employment through नरेगा scheme. ठीक है? मनरेगा के थ्रू एम्प्लॉयमेंट देंगे, उसके साथ साथ एजुकेशन और हेल्थ में भी इम्प्रोवाइजेशन लेके आएंगे. अंडरस्टूड? नाउ द टारगेट्स व्हिच वर सेट बाय 11th 5-year plan was first 9% of GDP growth. Second, to reduce the unemployment, to reduce the unemployment below 5%. Among these, we also had a target to cut down poverty by 10%. Social development, reduce maternal and infant mortality, reduce malnutrition by half, by 50%, eliminate gender gap in literacy, there should be zero gender gap in literacy, improve the sex ratio and forest cover. Sex ratio and forest cover both should be improved. Infrastructure vision, electricity to all villages and BPL households by 2009. All weather roads to habitations of 1000 plus population by 2009. Telephone and broadcast to every village by 2012. These were the ambitious targets set by 11th 5-year plan. It started with a good 9.3% of growth rate in the first year. But उसके बाद 2008 और 9 का ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस हुआ. ठीक है, 2008 का सब प्राइम लेंडिंग क्राइसिस. अब इसके साथ साथ हुआ क्या? ग्रोथ डिक्लाइन टू 6.7%. ऑल्दो नॉट टू मच इम्पैक्ट ऑन इंडियन इकोनॉमी, बट यस, again it was an external shock which somehow slumped our growth rate. 2009-11 में the recovery happened, rebounded to 8.6% and then 9.3%. However, the overall growth rate was around 8%. Understood? Done. 11th 5-year plan's performance, 8% growth rate. Agriculture grew by 3.7%, industry grew by 7.2% and services by 9.7%. Understood? Service sector was one of the most foremost or front running sectors at this time. Done. Social progress which was achieved. The poverty reduction accelerated because poverty declined by 1.5 percentage points per year from 2004-05 to 2009-10. That was twice the rate in the previous decade. So poverty reduction बहुत तेजी से होने लग गया. Investment, domestic savings increase हुई by 33.3% of GDP, domestic savings. This converted into investment और इसकी वजह से investment increased to 36.1%. Now remember the fact that always investment will be more than savings. हाँ, growth in savings will be always less than growth in investment. क्यों? क्योंकि investment एक ही साइड से नहीं होता है and there is a multiplier effect also. Understood? फिस्कल चैलेंजेस, मल्टीप्लायर याद करना, मनी मल्टीप्लायर बैंकिंग में पढ़ाया था और बैंकिंग में नहीं, इससे पहले पढ़ाया था, आगे बैंकिंग में और पढ़ेंगे. फिस्कल चैलेंजेस, एक्सपेंशनरी मेजर्स टू काउंटर ग्लोबल स्लोडाउन, इंक्रीज्ड फिस्कल इंडिकेटर्स, प्राइस स्टेबिलिटी एंड ऑयल इंपोर्ट कॉस्ट कॉन्स्टेंट द परफॉर्मेंस. मतलब क्या है इस चीज का? वेरी सिंपल दैट आफ्टर दिस टाइम पीरियड there were fiscal challenges. Now government was stimulating the economic growth. Do you remember Obamacare administration stimulated the growth of 1.6 multiplier was there. But here we need to understand that how much stimulus should we give to the economy. And when we are investing into economy, when we are stimulating the economy, गवर्नमेंट जब इकोनॉमी में पैसा डाल रही है, चाहे वो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे खर्चा कर रही है, चाहे वो पॉवर्टी, एजुकेशन, हेल्थ केयर, ग्राम सड़क योजना, किसी पे भी इन्वेस्टमेंट कर रही है, at that point of time what is government doing? Government is actually pushing money into the economy. Now कितना पैसा डालना है इकोनॉमी में और कितनी ग्रोथ होगी, this should be sustainable because we should not be creating financial burden. ठीक है, हम ये नहीं कर सकते हैं कि हम से फूड सब्सिडी देने के लिए बाहर से लोन ले रहे हैं या फूड सब्सिडी देने के लिए हम अपने फॉरेक्स रिजर्व्स खत्म कर रहे हैं. दैट शुड नॉट हैपन. एंड अगर ऐसा होता है तो फिस्कल चैलेंजेस आते हैं, फिस्कल डेफिसिट बढ़ जाता है, ट्रेड डेफिसिट बढ़ जाता है, ये सब चीजें होने लगती हैं. अंडरस्टूड. नाउ द 12th 5-year plan from 2012 to 2017. This is the last 5-year plan we are considering. Theme was very simple: faster, sustainable and more inclusive growth, asked by UPSC once. Moving ahead, this was aimed for 8% annual average economic growth. The environmental goals became headline objectives for the first time. Pollution, biodiversity protection, this is something which for the first time emerged in planning. कि हमें environmental conservation करना है, ये पहली बार देखने को मिला under a 5-year plan. 12th 5-year plan का target was 8% growth rate, but what we achieved was 6.9% growth rate. The new government was elected in 2014. The plan was not fully pursued upon. Then demonetization also occurred in 2016. Because of all of this, the economy somehow had a different trajectory than what was predicted earlier, or what would have been the situation if there was no such major change. So therefore, at this point of time, in 2012 to 2017, we were having a global economic crisis. The first thing was global financial crisis, ठीक है, which earlier impacted 2008, और उसके बाद यूरोजोन का क्राइसिस, यूरोजोन सॉवरेन डेट क्राइसिस, which affected India's growth 2011-12 में. Due to this, India's growth slowed to 6.2% and just 5% in the plan's first year. 2012 से लेके 2013 तक का जो ग्रोथ रेट था, that was very less, just 5%. Why? Because of the Eurozone sovereign debt crisis. We will discuss all of these case studies later. Moving further, the domestic constraints, macroeconomics imbalance. Macroeconomic imbalance इसलिए हुआ because हमारे यहाँ पे domestic economy में inflation increase होने लग गया, and major infrastructure projects delays reduce the investment rate and economic growth. because we were not able to eradicate the red tapeism, eradicate the project delays, eradicate the lethargy and corruption in the Indian economy, due to which the Indian economy was not yet viewed, or I would say pursued by global investors as a fast pacing, और I would say सिंगल विंडो सिस्टम नहीं था हमारे पास, सिंगल विंडो क्लियरेंस सिस्टम्स नहीं थे, हम डिजिटाइजेशन और डिजिटल गवर्नेंस की तरफ नहीं जा रहे थे, which from 2014 onwards under the Digital India Mission was taken at a mission mode। और 2014 के बाद से बहुत सारी चेंजेस आई इंडियन इकोनॉमी में, और उसकी वजह से इंडियन इकोनॉमी एक्चुअली ग्रू बाय नंबर्स, है ना। फिस्कल एक्सपेंशन, ड्यू टू फिस्कल एक्सपेंशन स्टिमुलस जो हमने 2008 के बाद देना स्टार्ट किया था, इसकी वजह से क्या हुआ, फिस्कल डेफिसिट का बर्डन बढ़ता गया। उसके साथ साथ टैक्स अनसर्टेनिटी ऑल्सो हैपेंड, बिकॉज 2012-13 के चेंजेस की वजह से हाँ इन्वेस्टर कॉन्फिडेंस गिर गया 2012-13 की वजह से, बिकॉज ऑफ द यूरोजोन डेट क्राइसिस, और उसकी वजह से व्हेन इन्वेस्टर्स कॉन्फिडेंस डिक्लाइंस, व्हिच मींस दैट वी विल हैव लेस इन्वेस्टमेंट either from outside or from inside the economy, जिसकी वजह से क्या हुआ, now the tax revenue of the government will also decline, so therefore government needed to introduce a lot of changes over here, understood। There were implementation issue also, because projects of energy and transport projects they usually slowed down and जल्दी clear नहीं हो रहे थे, so therefore government took two-fold policy challenge। First was to take the immediate action, reverse the deceleration by reviving investment quickly, tackle the infrastructure implementation constraints and resolve tax related uncertainties। First was to understand that how and why can we easily ensure that the resources of the government are back, ठीक है, कि जो रेवेन्यू गवर्नमेंट का आ रहा था, जो रुका हुआ है, वो वापस आना शुरू हो जाए। सेकेंड वॉज लॉन्ग टर्म स्ट्रैटेजी, कि इकोनॉमी को रिस्टोर कैसे किया जाए, रियल ग्रोथ कैसे लाई जाए, और लॉन्ग टर्म पॉलिसीज क्या होनी चाहिए। सो फॉर दीज टू थिंग्स गवर्नमेंट डिड व्हाट, फर्स्ट इट रिवाइव्ड द इन्वेस्टर सेंटिमेंट दैट इन्वेस्टर्स शुड स्टार्ट इन्वेस्टिंग बैक, इट रिमूव्ड द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इम्पेडिमेंट्स, कि जहां कहीं पे भी कोई भी ऑफिसर कहीं पे भी, अगर आप देखो फॉर एग्जांपल टैक्सेशन का मामला था, दैट पीपल यूजुअली इट यूज्ड टू टेक 3, 4, 5 years टू रिजॉल्व द टैक्स डिस्प्यूट्स। तो हमने क्या किया, हमने फेसलेस टैक्स असेसमेंट स्टार्ट कर दिया, ठीक है, कि आपने जाना ही नहीं है, ऑफिसर को पता ही नहीं है वो किसका केस उठा रहा है, कौन सा किस कॉर्पोरेट का वो टैक्सेशन का मैटर है, तो डिस्प्यूट्स रिजॉल्व होना स्टार्ट हो गया जल्दी। उसके साथ साथ एड्रेस द एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी इश्यूज और क्लैरिफाई द नेल्प, दैट वाज द न्यू एनर्जी, है ना, पॉलिसी, न्यू एनर्जी पॉलिसी का फ्रेमवर्क, सो दैट वी हैव मोर एक्सप्लोरेशन ऑफ हाइड्रोकार्बन्स, हेल्प के बदले नेल्प लेके आ गए, ठीक है। सो देयरफॉर फिस्कल रिफॉर्म्स एंड रिसोर्स मैनेजमेंट which was introduced by 12th 5-year plan. First was we introduced bold steps which were needed at that point of time, so therefore taxation के reforms के लिए we introduced GST implementation from 2017 onwards। दूसरा GST system आ गया। Fiscal correction, फिस्कल डेफिसिट टारगेट वो सेट एट 3% ऑफ द जीडीपी, क्या हमें फिस्कल डेफिसिट 2016-17 में 3% चाहिए। हाँ, सब्सिडी रैशनलाइजेशन, दैट वी शुड डिक्रीज द सब्सिडीज, वेदर फूड सब्सिडी, फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी, जो भी सब्सिडी है इसको डिक्रीज करना पड़ेगा। वी कैन नॉट लेट एवरीवन जस्ट हाँ गवर्नमेंट को सब्सिडी देते जाओ। और उसके साथ साथ एक और चीज, रैशनलाइजेशन में बस इतना नहीं था कि सब्सिडीज को खत्म करना है, बल्कि सब्सिडीज को डायरेक्टली ट्रांसफर करना है अकाउंट्स में, डीबीटी में। इसीलिए हम लेके आ गए क्या, जनधन, आधार, मोबाइल, जैम ट्रिनिटी, ठीक है, अंडरस्टूड। चलो 25 मॉनिटरेबल टारगेट्स वेर सेट फॉर इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ, फॉर पॉवर्टी एंड एम्प्लॉयमेंट एंड फॉर एजुकेशन ऑल्सो। ये टारगेट्स हमें अचीव करने थे अलॉन्ग विद दिस 5-year प्लान, ठीक है। 25 ऐसे टारगेट्स सेट किए गए थे फॉर द सस्टेनेबल एंड इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ ऑफ इंडिया, ठीक है। इसमें से हेल्थ एंड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के टारगेट्स अलग है, दैट हमें इन्फेंट मोर्टेलिटी रेट 25 लेके आनी है, हमें मैटरनल मोर्टेलिटी रेट 1 डेथ पर 1000 लाइव बर्थ्स इस लेवल पे लेके आना है, हमें टोटल फर्टिलिटी रेट 2.1 लेके आना है, जबकि रिसेंटली वी विटनेस अंडर NFHS 5 दैट इंडियाज टोटल फर्टिलिटी रेट इज 2 नॉट 2.1, ठीक है। मतलब इससे भी कम हो गई थी, विच वॉज समहाउ क्वेश्चन। इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रायोरिटीज, इन्वेस्टमेंट रेट को इंक्रीज करना है 9%, इन्वेस्टमेंट हमें इंक्रीज करनी है, दैट वी शुड हैव एन इन्वेस्टमेंट ऑफ एटलीस्ट 9% ऑफ द जीडीपी। उसके साथ साथ इरिगेटेड एरिया को, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, ऑल वेदर रोड्स, रूरल टेरी डेंसिटी एंड कंप्लीट फ्रेट कॉरिडोर्स। नाउ ऑल ऑफ दीज टारगेट्स यू शुड एटलीस्ट मेक अ नोट ऑफ इट, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दीज टारगेट्स वी कैन मेंशन दीज टारगेट्स इन आवर मेंस आंसर्स। ठीक है, अंडरस्टूड। फर्दर, in terms of sectoral growth, agriculture witnessed a growth of 4%, mining witnessed a growth of 5.7%, manufacturing 7%, services, if you see, transport 11%, business 9.9%. This data is not that much important, but just to make sure that you understand that how much growth sector wise was witnessed, that is why I mentioned it. ठीक है, done. चलो, environmental service deliverables, we set environmental targets कि हमें 1 मिलियन हेक्टेयर्स का ग्रीन कवर बढ़ाना है, हमें 30,000 मेगावाट्स की कैपेसिटी चाहिए विद रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी, एमिशन रिडक्शन 20 to 25% रिडक्शन फ्रॉम 2005 लेवल्स बाय 2020। और अगर आप देखो ये टारगेट्स हमने यहाँ पे सेट किए, बट आज भी हम इनको रिवाइज कर रहे हैं इन द फॉर्म ऑफ नेशनल एनडीसीज, नेशनली डिटरमिन्ड कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस। ठीक है, I would be rather happy if you mention the 3 most latest revised NDCs of India in the comment section. Banking access, 90% of the households got banking access, direct cash transfer via Aadhaar platform, Jan Dhan mobile, Aadhaar mobile. ठीक है, so this is all what we had in 12th 5-year plan. With this we conclude today's discussion, but before that, planning achievements, that due to all of the planning from 1951 to 2017, what all did India achieve? ठीक है, that is something which we should remember, क्योंकि that is the summary of all of this. So therefore, when it was the time of independence in 1947, our GDP was just 2.7 lakh crores. ठीक है, ये इतनी फंडिंग है या ये इतना पैसा है जितना हमने रिसेंटली पब्लिक सेक्टर अंडरटेकिंग्स, बैंक्स और पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक्स को रिवाइव करने में डाला था। ठीक है, 1991 में द जीडीपी ग्रू बाय $266 बिलियन। हाँ, currently our GDP is around $4 trillion. Per capita income has also increased to 2.2 lakh, even more than that. India became the 3rd largest economy in Asia after China and Japan. It became the 5th largest economy globally after US, China, Japan and Germany. Recently it became 4th also, then came back to 5th and 6th. 3rd largest economy in terms of purchasing power parity. It is currently also 3rd largest economy in terms of purchasing power parity. The fact was asked by UPSC once. Substantial forex reserves, as I said, we can not $1 billion, but 1991 में हमारे पास $1 billion था, अभी we have 723. Recently we had, currently तो अभी याद नहीं है कितना होगा, it is less than 700. Recently we had $723 billion of forex reserves. ठीक है, understood? चलो, सोशल इंडिकेटर्स की बात करें तो एजुकेशन भी एक्सपैंड हो गई है। अगर उस टाइम की बात करें 1947 में तो वी हैड जस्ट 20 यूनिवर्सिटीज, बट करंटली अगर आप देखें तो वी हैव 50,000 कॉलेजेस एंड 1100 प्लस यूनिवर्सिटीज टुडे, है ना। हेल्थ, इफ यू सी, maternal mortality rate, IMR, literacy, disease, industrial infrastructure, all of this has improved. What were the shortfalls of planning? Why didn't planning actually work, or which were the areas where planning actually somehow failed? First was poverty or multidimensional poverty. ठीक है, unemployment remained high. There was jobless growth. Jobs were not that much created. Education quality of the education was less, however enrollment increased. Gender disparities, they still exist. Export stagnation, the exports somehow stagnant only, not that much growth in exports, because this year we witnessed in the 2025 that our services, the export of services have exceeded the export of goods. That is how the export should have performed during those years of planning. Farm productivity, not that much increase. Productivity पे UPSC ने क्वेश्चन पूछा हुआ है. Farm productivity, the comparison of farm productivity or agricultural productivity between India and China, that was asked in UPSC Prelims. So therefore 1991 के reforms those were a paradigm shift. That was a paradigmal, or I would say a paradigm shift of India, or I would say shift in the India's economic reforms. Since 1991, we have, I would say, shunned away the socialistic pattern of the society, and rather we adopted the mixed economy, और उसके साथ साथ ही the growth also changed, the pattern, the trajectory of the growth also changed. Currently where we are, that will be analyzed in the next video, where we will start the next chapter of NITI Aayog and other things. So therefore, once we discuss all of this, and with the Indian economy or economic survey, budget, all of the things will come to place, and you just need to follow one thing. That is, first, follow the lectures, follow the book, and make some short notes. If you still have any problem regarding anything in Indian economy or GS per se or CSAT, you can come to us, you can have a discussion with me, we will sort things away. Done? With this, I will conclude today's session. Thank you for being here. Jai Hind.